My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning, and welcome to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. Today I'm going to read stories to the young people, to the little ones, and I'm sure some of you have heard these stories in school, but I enjoyed them, some of them when I was young. The first story that I'm going to tell you is Guess How Much I Love You. How many of you have heard that? How much do you love me? And you say, how much? And you say, this much. How much? I love you this much. I remember my mom doing that to me. I did it to my children. I'm sure many young people do those say that same thing with their parents. The young man that I take care of, he said, he was always saying, Cleo, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And he always says after that, how much? And so I have to hold out my arms. How much do you think? How much do you love me? And he holds out his arms. I love you this much. Lots and lots and lots of love. So I chose this story today. Guess how much I love you. And maybe that's a question you could ask somebody today. How much do you love me? Guess how much I love you. Oh, I love you lots and lots and lots. Little nut brown hare who was going to bed held on tight to big nut brown hare's very long ears. He wanted to be sure that big nut brown hare was listening. Guess how much I love you, he said. Oh, I don't think I could guess that, said big nut hare. This much, said little nut brown hare, stretching out his arms as wide as they could go. Big nut brown hare had even longer arms. But I love you this much, he said. That is a lot, thought little nut brown hare. I love you as high as I can reach, said little nut brown hare. I love you as high as I can reach, said big nut brown hare. That is very high, thought little nut brown hare. I wish I had arms like that. Then little nut brown hare had a good idea. He climbed upside down and reached up the tree trunk with his feet. And I love you all the way up to your toes, said big nut brown hare, swinging him up over his head. I love you as high as I can hop, laughed little nut brown hare. Well, but I love you as high as I can hop, smiled big nut brown hare, and he hopped so high that his ears touched the branches above, bouncing up and down. "That's good hopping," thought little Nut Brown Hare. "I wish I could hop like that." "I love you all the way down the lane, as far as the river," cried little Nut Brown Hare. "I love you across the river and over the hills," said big Nut Brown Hare. "That's very far," thought little Nut Brown Hare. He was almost too sleepy to think any more. Then he looked beyond the thorn bushes out into the big dark night. Nothing could be farther than the sky. "I love you right up to the moon," he said, and closed his eyes. "Oh, that's far," said big Nut Brown Hare. "That is very, very far." Big Nut Brown Hare settled little Nut Brown Hare into his bed of leaves. He leaned over and kissed him good night. Then he laid close by and whispered with a smile, "I love you right up to the moon and back." How much do you love me, huh? All the way up to the moon and back. Well, my next story is a little about a young man who was having a lot of trouble. And I'm sure a lot of you had heard this story before. It's called Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Woo, that's a lot. Well, I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. And when I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on the skateboard, and by mistake, I dropped my sweater in the sink while the water was running, and I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. At breakfast, Anthony found a Corvette Stingray car kit in his breakfast cereal box, and Nick found a junior undercover agent code ring in his breakfast cereal box. But in my breakfast cereal box, all I found was breakfast cereal. I think I'll move to Australia. In the car pool, Mrs. Gibson let Becky have a seat by the window. Audrey and Elliot got seats by the window too. I said I was being scrunched. I said I was being smushed. I said if I don't get a seat by the window, I am going to be car sick. No one even answered. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. At school, Mrs. Dixon liked Paul's picture of the sailboat better than my picture of the invisible castle. At singing time, she said I sang too loud. At counting time, she said I left out 16. Who needs 16? I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I could tell because Paul said I wasn't his best friend anymore. He said that Philip Parker was his best friend and that Albert Moyo was his next best friend and that I was only his third best friend. I hope you sit on a tack, I said to Paul. I hope the next time you get a double-decker strawberry ice cream cone, the ice cream part falls off the cone part and land in Australia. There were 2 cupcakes in Philip Parker's lunch bag, and Albert got a Hershey bar with almonds, and Paul's mother gave him a piece of jelly roll that had little coconut sprinkles on the top. Guess whose mother forgot to put a dessert? It was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. That's what it was, because after school, my mom took us all to the dentist, and Dr. Fields found a cavity just in me. Come back next week and I'll fill it, said Dr. Fields. Next week, I said. I'm going to Australia. On the way downstairs, the elevator door closed on my foot, and while we were waiting for my mom to get the car, Anthony made me fall where it was muddy, and then when I started crying because of the mud, Nick said I was a crybaby, and while I was pushing Nick for saying crybaby, my mom came back with the car and scolded me for being muddy and fighting. I am having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I told everybody. No one even answered. So when we went to the shoe store to buy some sneakers, Anthony chose white ones with blue stripes. Nick chose red ones with white stripes. I chose blue ones with red stripes, but then the shoe man said, "We're all sold out. They made me buy plain old white ones, but they can't make me wear them." When we picked up my dad at his office, he said I couldn't play with his copy machine, but I forgot. He also said to watch out for the books on his desk, and I was careful as could be except for my elbow. He also said don't fool around with his phone, but I think I called Australia. My dad said, please don't pick him up anymore. It was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. There were lima beans for dinner, and I hate lima beans. There was kissing on TV, and I hate kissing. My bath was too hot. I got soap in my eye. My marble went down the drain, and I had to wear my railroad train pajamas. I hate my railroad train pajamas. When I went to bed, Nick took back the pillow he said I could keep, and the Mickey Mouse nightlight burned out, and I bit my tongue. The cat went to sleep with Anthony, not with me. It has been a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. My mom says some days are like that, even in Australia. Wow. Alexander had a terrible, terrible day, didn't he? Woo! We're going to let him sleep a while and we're going to go on commercial. And we will be right back with Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. Be right back.
We all know smoking is harmful, right? But did you know that even after the smoke clears, the danger remains? This is called third-hand smoke. Third-hand smoke is the toxic residue left behind on surfaces like furniture, walls, or even clothes. These harmful chemicals can linger for days, weeks, or even months. Young children and pets are especially vulnerable. They can ingest these toxins simply by touching contaminated surfaces and then putting their hands or toys in their mouth. The best way to protect your loved ones? Make your home and car completely smoke-free. Remember, it's not just about the smoke you see, but the unseen toxins we leave behind. Protect your family from third-hand smoke. Choose a smoke-free environment.
Hi, my name is Cammie Starks. I would recommend any parent to participate in this program due to the fact that it helps us learn about what the kids are learning and also to better our children in the community. And I just give thanks to those, Lucy, that recommended me to come to the program, and it's just been an honor and finding out the development of the children of the school systems that's very needed, and I just give thanks, and I ask that any parent, friends, family to participate, because it's very helpful to find out what's going on with the children and also to help the children, and I just give thanks. Hi, my name is Cammie Starks. I would recommend any parent to participate in this program due to the fact that it helps us learn about what the kids are learning and also to better our children in the community. And I just give thanks to those, Lucy, that recommended me to come to the program, and it's just been an honor and finding out the development of the children of the school systems that's very needed, and I just give thanks, and I ask that any parent, friends, family to participate, because it's very helpful to find out what's going on with the children and also to help the children, and I just give thanks.
Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. My next story is a story I'm sure most of you have heard in school, but I love this story. It's Miss Nelson is Missing. Where's Miss Nelson? Oh, please bring her back. Okay. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceilings. Paper planes whisked through the air. They were the worst behaved class in the whole school. "Now settle down," said Miss Nelson in a sweet voice, but the class would not settle down. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. They were even rude during story hour, and they always refused to do their lessons. "Something will have to be done," said Miss Nelson. The next morning, Miss Nelson did not come to school. "Wow!" yelled the kids. "Now we can really act up. They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. Today, let's be just terrible, they said. Not so fast, hissed an unpleasant voice. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. I am your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp. And she rapped the desk with her ruler. Where is Miss Nelson? Asked the children. Never mind that, snapped Miss Swamp. Open those arithmetic books. Miss Nelson's kids did as they were told. They could see that Miss Swamp was a real witch. She meant business. Right away, she put them to work. And she loaded them down with homework. We'll have no story hour today, said Miss Swamp. Keep your mouths shut, said Miss Swamp. Sit perfectly still, said Miss Swamp, and if you misbehave, you'll be sorry, said Miss Swamp. The kids in room 207 had never worked so hard. Days went by, and there was no sign of Miss Nelson. The kids missed Miss Nelson. Maybe we should try to find her, they said. Some of them went to the police. Detective McSmog was assigned to the case. He listened to their story. He scratched his chin. He said, I think Miss Nelson is missing. Detective McSmog would not be much help. Other kids went to Miss Nelson's house. The shades were tightly drawn, and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming up the street. If she sees us, she'll give us more homework. They got away just in time. Maybe something terrible happened to Miss Nelson. Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark, said one of the kids, but that didn't seem likely. Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars, said another kid, but that didn't seem likely either. I know, exclaimed one know-it-all. Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies. But that was the least likely of all. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. It seems that Miss Nelson was never coming back, and they would be stuck with Miss Viola Swamp forever. They heard footsteps in the hall. Here comes the witch, they whispered. Hello, children, someone said in a sweet voice. It was Miss Nelson. Did you miss me? She asked. We certainly did, cried all the children, all the kids. Where were you? That's my little secret, said Miss Nelson. How about a story hour? Oh, yes, cried the kids. Miss Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one was rude or silly. What brought about this lovely change? She asked. That's our little secret, said the kids. Back home, Miss Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet, right next to an ugly black dress. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. I'll never tell, ha 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 ha, I'll never tell, she said to herself with a smile. P.S. Detective McCauley is working on a new case. He is now looking for Miss Viola Swamp. What happened? What happened to Miss Viola Swamp? Well, that's that story. I really like that story. I hope you enjoyed that story because I used to love reading that story. This is my aunt brought us this book with this story in it when I was a kid. When I was very young. This is not the story because this was published originally in 1963, and I was more than little by that time. I was almost about to graduate from high school. But my aunt loved this story. And so it's Where the Wild Things Are. Have you ever heard of that story? I think it's a very famous story, and a lot of you probably have heard it at least once or twice. I hope you hear stories all the time. Because I was talking to someone, a little girl, and I wanted we were telling each other stories, so I said, "Oh, let's tell Hansel and Gretel." She said, "Hansel and Gretel? I never heard that story." She was 10 years old. I never heard that story of Hansel and Gretel. I said, "You never heard the story of Hansel and Gretel? How could you not have heard the story of Hansel and Gretel? Everybody heard the story of Hansel and Gretel." I said, "But I didn't hear the story of Hansel and Gretel." Oh, and I was so sad for her because we had such fun with that story when we were young. The parents, Hansel and Gretel, the witch, and what happens to the witch. And it turns out, well, for the evil people were gone, and they lived happily ever after. I want to tell you the story of Hansel and Gretel one day, but today we're going to tell you Where the Wild Things Are. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, his mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he went to bed without eating anything. That very night, in Max's room, a forest grew, and grew and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through the night and day, and in and out of weeks, and almost over a year, to where the wild things are. And when he came to a place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gashed their terrible teeth, till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick, and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible teeth of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once, and they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. Oh, Okay. And made him king of all the wild things. And now, cried Max, let the wild rumpus start. And the animals are climbing on the trees. And let me turn this book around so you could see. Could you see all the animals climbing all around? Now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around, from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said no. The wild things roared their terrible roar and gashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye and sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. That is the story of where the wild things are. What a wonderful dream. What a wonderful imagination he has, right? In the beginning, and grew and grew. This book kind of changes. So teeth and roll their eyes. So I got a few lines wrong, but you got the gist of that story, and I hope you enjoyed it. However it was read, I hope you enjoyed it because I enjoyed reading it to you. And those are the stories I have today, but I'm going to find another story. I wish you were here so you could say, "Oh, tell this story," or "Oh, tell that story." Oh, or I have a story that I want you to tell, Miss Cleo. Oh, I love that story. I love it when you say that. Oh, and see, I would bring this book if I was with you. Let me put that down. If I was with you, I'd bring this book. And this book is called The 20th Century's Children's Book of Treasure. And they have old stories in it, and they have new stories in it. And I kind of read you the old stories. I wonder why I kind of read you the old stories. Huh? So you have to come and tell me or send Stan a message so I'll know what stories to tell. Your favorite stories. Because I love it when I tell you your favorite stories. But, this is one of my favorite stories. I'm going to tell this. I got to tell this one. This is when I was a kid, I loved this story. When I was young, because I always dreamed. I always dreamt of different things. And one of the bunch of things, I said, I must have been. How many of you have said this in your life? I know there's quite a bit who have said, "I think I was adopted." Yeah, I think I was adopted. I wish I was adopted. I could do this and blah, 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 blah. You think I was adopted? Mom, was I adopted? No, Cleo, you were not adopted. Oh, gosh. But when my nephew was very young. My sister remarried. He was just a baby. And so her husband adopted my nephew when he was about 5 years old. But they forgot to tell him what they were doing or how the thing went. So he had it in his mind, and this is what he thought. And he thought, we always wondered why he never asked for anything. This was a good kid. He never asked for anything. So we had to give the George, you want this, George, you want that. And he would not, he really didn't want too much. So when he was 14, he said to his mother, "You're really not my mother." And my sister said, "What? I'm really not your mother?" "Yes, I am. I'm your real mother." "No, you're not." Because when he was 5 years old, this is what he thought. He thought that he was born, his mother left him in the hospital, and these people came and got him and adopted him. And so he really didn't know who his mother was. And so my sister could not convince, I hope she doesn't get mad I told this story. My sister could not imagine what was going through his head. So naturally, who did he call? He called his Auntie Cleo because he knew she'd tell him the truth. He said, "Auntie, is my mother my real mother? Who's my mother?" No, first my sister said, Cleo, he doesn't believe I'm his mother. Could you believe that he doesn't believe I'm his mother? Would you please tell him I'm his mother? So he got on the phone, and I said, "George, she is your mother, but she is your mother. And your father, well, your father adopted you when you were 5 years old. That's your real mother. That's your father. He adopted you. I am your real aunt, blood aunt." Don't ever forget that, I said to him. "I'm your blood aunt." So he said, okay. But he wanted to know his other father. So we took him to see his other father, his biological father, and he was happy. But his father was always nervous, my sister's husband, that their relationship would change if he knew. But a father is a father, a mother is a mother, and they're not going to desert the people who have loved them all of their lives and have always been with them. They're always going to be with you. And if they decide to leave you for a minute, don't worry about a thing, because they'll certainly be back. Because there's not all that many places that you could go where you are truly, truly loved. And so he always stayed his father till the day he passed away. And George has always been his son. And his children are his grandchildren. So that's that little story. I thought I would just sort of kind of pass that on to you. And hopefully the family will not be mad that I did that. But love is a powerful thing when you care for somebody, right? When you care for someone and love someone, the little ones. And I just want to say just a few things about reading to your children, which is very, very important. Get a book, read to your children. And, all of us don't read so well, and that's okay. And listen to your children read. Tell them a story, get a book, let the children read to you. It's the same. The big thing is they're going to love reading to you. They're going to love you reading to them. Get a library in your house, a small library. I've always had a library. My father could not read. He did not go to school. But he read a little bit. I think he went to, I don't know what grade he went to, but when it came harvest time and he was on the farm, they stopped school. They had to work in the fields, and so they didn't have very much education. He didn't have very much education, but he had a lot of curiosity. Oh, he had the curiosity, and he loved books, and he wanted to know how to read books, so he did read. And we used to lay on the floor and read the newspaper together. The Hartford Times. We used to lay on the floor and read the Hartford Times. And he filled our house with books and paper and pencils in an old pencil sharpener that didn't have the cover on it. So all the stuff always went to the floor. And we always had to sort of clean it up eventually. Not right away. So read to your children. Get books. Go to the library. Stretch their knowledge. Well, that's the end of our show today. And I'm very happy to be here with you today. And I'm happy that you were with me today. And come back next week. And there'll be more stories, maybe a storyteller or two. We'll see. We'll see what happens as I venture through the week and try to put the show together. So remember, read a little, write a little, dream big. And I'll see you next week.